Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So, I've got a little longer review for you guys today because I read a book that I really enjoyed and really want more people to read so that I can talk about it with them. And just it was an interesting experience for me, and so I wanted to take some time and reflect on it. So I read How to Be Safe by Tom McAllister. Now, first I need to tell you why I read this. So I have been listening to the podcast that he co-hosts with Mike Ingram, I think is his last name. I've been listening to that podcast pretty much since it started, and I love it. It's probably my favorite bookish podcast. They are both very snarky, very cynical people. I enjoy their humor. They talk about literary fiction quite a bit, like that's sort of like their primary genre. They'll branch out a little bit, but mostly literary fiction. But they do it in a way that I think is like mostly non-pretentious, and I think that can be a tricky thing to do. I think sometimes people who are mostly lit fic readers get up in their own feelings about being that. I was definitely that way. Like, I pretty much only read literary fiction up until probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and some of it was just that I was younger, but like, I definitely felt pretty special that I knew who the prize winners were and whatever. Oh my God, it was insufferable. They are totally not that way. So that's why I really like that podcast. And I've been a little afraid to read any of their fiction, and here's why. I don't know them, like literally don't know them at all. But if you listen to somebody every week, you feel like you know them and they feel like friends to some degree. And I realized after reading this that I had been holding back on reading any of their fiction because I was worried that I wouldn't like it and that would affect our friendship, which is absurd. Like, I know that is not a thing, but like, I think subconsciously I was like, oh, I'll like, maybe it will affect my enjoyment of the podcast if I don't like their fiction. I am so excited to tell you that I love this. Like, this is probably my second favorite book of the year so far, right behind Roxane Gay's Aidi. That was like, bar none, my favorite book so far this year. This book, though, is really, really good. I shouldn't have been so trepidatious either because both of those guys they teach creative writing, I think, at Temple. And then they both went to they got their master's at the Iowa workshop. And that's like pretty much the best writing program in the country. So like, I don't know why I was so afraid of this, but I was. So I finally came to this book, and the reason I chose this one to read was because I was really intrigued by the premise of this. So pretty much what I knew about the premise going in was that it follows a main character who was a teacher at a school who got suspended a couple of days before there was a mass shooting at that school. And because of that, she comes under investigation as potentially being a part of that conspiracy, and that she, even though she wasn't a part of it, that it sort of ruins her life. That is what this book is about, but all of the things I just told you literally I think take place in the first like 20 to 30 pages of this book, and then it really is essentially watching this main character unravel, and it is a lot of thoughts and musings about our gun culture here in America, which is insane. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It breaks my heart that this is like a completely plausible premise for a novel. This is, I think, the third or fourth book this year that has this as a premise, and I know that I have at least one more that I want to read that has this premise. What the actual fuck? Okay, so that being said, I think what's really interesting about this book is that he also writes nonfiction. Like, I think he writes and or teaches narrative nonfiction. I think you really see the bones of that in this book. There's a lot of just like beautiful kind of musings about gun culture, gun violence. And what I adored about this book thematically was that it really is an exploration of the relationship between gun violence and rape culture, or like misogyny and a certain kind of male aggression. I thought that he explored the relationship between that in a fascinating way. You can think about, you know how there's been recently some like more explicitly reported links between the incel community and violence, like the involuntary celibate, that whole bullshit. And there, I think was I don't think it was a shooting. I think it was like a truck ramming into pedestrians. That's lovely. In Toronto. Or maybe it was a shooting. I can't remember. But I think increasingly we're having this discussion about the sense of kind of like male entitlement to a certain kind of sexual experience and violence. And I think that's really what this book is getting at. I also really appreciated that this book, I think maybe, I sure if I can say this definitively, but this has one of the best male author portrayals of a female protagonist. What I mean by that is that I think often, especially in literary fiction, but generally, I just don't think that men often do a great job of writing female protagonists. I think that a lot of them are trying and are getting better. I think that we have like at least more competently written female protagonists from male authors, but I do think that it's something that's like a real struggle, and it's kind of sad because I think what underlies that is a lack of like empathy of what it really actually means to be in a different person's shoes. Anyway, we could go on a whole tangent about that, but I think what often happens is that I think the kind of thing that male authors intuitively know is that a part of being a woman is that your body you are more self-conscious about your body in a very specific way, especially with kind of in relationship to public consumption. And I think male authors know that, and they don't always know how to kind of communicate that, so it comes off as still being very objectifying of female bodies, even if that's not the intention. I think he does a really lovely job of inhabiting the space of women being very aware of their bodies in relationship to other people and other people's expectations in a way that is not objectifying. And to me, what this shows is that he's an author who has a lot of empathy and is a very good observer of other humans. Again, because I listen to his podcast, I happen to know that he has a lovely wife who seems awesome. She was on at least one episode that I've heard, and she seemed great. And also that he has a really good relationship with her. He has a lot of female friends. Like, he actually, I think, he sees women as other humans and is able to communicate that. And I'm sad to say that that's a rare skill set, but it is, honestly. There were just a lot of small moments in this that I was like, you have spent time with women, you have noticed these things about them. Like, one of her first thoughts when all these media people come to her doorstep is like, oh shit, I can't go out because I'm not wearing a bra. That is such a relatable moment. And I was like, oh, like that was when I kind of sold me on like, okay, I think that you're actually going to do a pretty good job of inhabiting this person's mind. So there's that. I really did appreciate how much of a human this character was, and not just like a man with female parts, which I think often is kind of what can happen in literary fiction with female protagonists. I also think he does a really good job of kind of having like, essentially this person is like slipping into like a breakdown, and like the title, How to Be Safe, it's this idea of like this hyper awareness that we are so out of control in terms of like what can happen to us in the world. And like this kind of is triggered by this experience with gun violence that she has, but like she also experiences that specifically as a woman whose body, like, you know, women are kind of intrinsically more vulnerable in the world. So she has a lot of observations about that. But just in general, this is like her kind of really confronting like her lack of control and her inability to deal with that. We explore her relationship with her parents. That was very fucked up. We explore her relationship with her half brother, and he's a former addict, and how he's gotten his life together versus she hasn't. And I guess these are all spoilers, and this is not the kind of book that I feel like you can really spoil unless you just read the whole thing. So anyway, I really liked how he kind of handled the mind space of somebody who was not well, basically. I thought he did that more convincingly than a number of books that I've read that are sort of in the same kind of genre recently, specifically Sorry to Disrupt the Peace. This book is much better than that one, and that one got a lot more attention. I'm not totally sure why, but anyway, this one I think handles that kind of subject matter a lot better. So I really admired it from that respect. And then I just really admired how this book was able to be like horrifying, humorous, insightful. Like that was sort of like the pattern. Like something terrible would happen, something funny would happen, then there would be a very insightful reflection on what had happened. And I want to read you a couple of passages just to give you kind of a sense of both the humor and also the kind of, again, like horrifying elements to this, just because I don't know that this is a book for everybody, but I found this book genuinely very funny. It's very darkly funny, but this actually made me laugh out loud in several places. So I want to give you a sense of some of the kind of voice of this book, because I think that's going to be a big part of whether or not you'll like it, and then we'll wrap things up. So I want to read you a little bit from the prologue, which I think actually started as a short story somewhere. It's in the present tense, and it's only for a few pages it does this, but this is sort of the setup to give you kind of a sense of the types of kind of insights that he has. So after the shooting, they will investigate his journals and his music and his web browsing history, and they will try to paint a portrait that makes sense. They will shape a narrative around him that suggests the possibility of solutions. During the autopsy, they will find the pizza in his stomach, and they will find the residue of Adderall and Ritalin in his blood, and they will cut his brain open, hoping to find some clue about what makes people like him exist. But they will find nothing besides what they always find. His brain is just another brain. It's connected to someone with a bad soul, but you can't bottle that or study it. The slivers of his brain placed on slides under a microscope will not show the memories, won't allow them to read the rejection and the emptiness and the abuse and the fear. The slides will not show the ways people can be ruined just by the existing in the world. Shell-shocked acquaintances will say without irony that he had so much to live for, ignorant of the fact that the prospect of having to live like this for another 50 years was not the solution to, but rather the cause of his hopelessness. So that is kind of giving you a sense of sort of the thesis of gun violence, or like why people commit mass shootings in this book from the author. So I also really just like that prologue, even though it's a short section and the rest of the book doesn't read that way. I really enjoyed that particular bit. I should mention also that there is some kind of magical realism in this book that you aren't fully, because you're so disoriented as to what you can trust from the protagonist, from the narrator, you aren't really sure it's happening, but it does slowly kind of descend into a type of magical realism, and I personally really enjoyed that. There's also some interludes in here. Sorry, I'm like paging through this book. There's also some kind of like interludes in here describing the lives of the various victims, and I thought that was handled. That's more like third person. Most of this book is first person. I thought that was handled in a really interesting way because it kind of undercuts this idea of like, this book is really, I think, also undercutting the idea of either glorifying the victims or the shooter. I think this book really wants you to live in sort of the like mundane nature of these events in a lot of ways. Even though they're horrifying, they're also happening to just like normal people, and our attempts to sort of like create narrative out of it, I think he's sort of wanting to comment on the futility of that. Anyway, let me also just read you, this gives you a sense of the first person narration, and I think this will give you a sense of if the humor and sort of like how it's delivered will work for you. For me, this, like, genuinely, this makes me laugh out loud, but it won't for everyone, and a little bit of a warning, there is some foul language in this. So, 8 weeks after the shooting, I got an email from a man who called himself Patriot Paul and who said, "I'm going to show up at your house one night when you're not expecting it, and I'm going to cut your whore mouth open with my Bowie knife and fill it up with dicks. I'm going to cover you in dicks and smother you with them, and when you're dead, I'll hang you over my mantle like a trophy." I wrote back and asked him where he... Sorry, this makes me laugh. I wrote back and asked him where he gets all those extra dicks, and is there a wholesaler nearby because I could use a few spares. I get these emails frequently. Middle-aged men saw news of the shooting and thought, the world needs me now. They put on their capes and swooped into the rescue, but when they got there, they found that they had no superpowers. They were just sad men in capes, so they got angry and looked for a woman to blame. They were terrified and wanted to dress it up as courage, and they spewed hate into a world in hopes of drowning out the threats. They demanded explanations, and then before anyone had a chance to explain, offered their own theories. So that kind of, to me, illustrates that sort of formula that this book has of like something genuinely terrible, something that I think is genuinely funny, and then like a real nice observation about particularly the relationship between gun violence and misogyny. And this is just like, that's what this book has going for it. So if you can't tell, I really, really love this book. I do think it slows down a little bit in the second half. Like, it started to lose me a little bit, which is why I didn't end up giving it a full 5 stars. Like, I've only given 1 5-star out this year, because to me, a 5-star is an all-time favorite book. I'm not sure this is quite there, but I really, really enjoyed this. And hey, who knows? If I'm still thinking about this as much as I have been the last couple weeks at the end of the year, I may bump this up to a 5-star, because this is some of the best literary fiction that I've read in quite a while, and I think actually delivered on its promise and its premise in a way that was really satisfying to me. The writing was also really strong. I'm somebody who tends to like kind of clear, impactful prose. That to me is what makes the prose beautiful, as opposed to like a lot of kind of more flowery language. Different strokes for different folks. That's just my preference, and that's definitely what this book has. I think that this would be a fascinating book to read in a book club, especially if you read it maybe in conjunction with some nonfiction. So like if you've ever read Dave Collins' Columbine, like if you read this and maybe Not That Bad, that collection about rape culture that Roxane Gay edited this year. Like, that could be an interesting, I think, sort of like group discussion. Yeah, I just really love this, and I would love to see more people read it, because honestly I want to talk about it with more people. I'm about to make my best friend here in Nashville read it so that we can chat about it. Yeah, I really, really love this book. Highly recommend. I would love to see more people grabbing it. I know it's literary fiction, which is, you know, somewhat of a hard sell, I think, these days, but I think that it's short. It's not like this is a huge commitment, and to me it was a really rewarding read that I have been continuing to think about even a couple weeks after I read it. So highly recommend. Pick this one up. So I think that will do it. Yeah, I haven't done a longer review like this in a while, but I liked it. So noted to myself that I enjoy doing this. Anyway, I think that will do it for me. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. I am Books Like Whoa everywhere. And yeah, I think that will do it. I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!